Over the years of Call of Duty, there have been tons and tons of missions. Out of all those campaign levels, there have been a few so memorable that they come to mind right away when you think of a certain Call of Duty title. For example, you have Vendetta in World at War.
Remember, no Russian.
In Modern Warfare 2, Suffer With Me in Black Ops 2, or Clean House in Modern Warfare 2019. These missions can be memorable for a few different reasons. It can be caused by a certain aspect of the gameplay, a shocking moment, or the impact on the story. But in Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, we got to play not only the best mission in the game, obviously, but what is considered one of the best missions in Call of Duty. And that mission is the firing range. No, I'm just kidding. It's All Ghillied Up. For those of you who haven't played this mission, or if it's been a while, here's what happens. In the year 1996, a man by the name of Imram Zakhaev was making a deal for used fuel rods from Chernobyl, so the government ordered an assassination on Zakhaev in order to prevent him from completing the deal. This took place 10 years after the explosion of the fourth reactor in the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. You play as Captain Price under the command of Captain Macmillan, and you have to stealthily reach a vantage point in order to disrupt the arms deal and take out Zakhaev. Today we're going to be looking over a little bit of the history of the Chernobyl disaster, the development of the mission, and what makes this level so great. I also want to mention that I will be including the mission after All Ghillied Up, which is one shot, one kill, since it takes place in the same setting. With that being said, let's get into it. Back in the mid-80s when we had Bruce Springsteen, Madonna, Waiting for Nirvana, there was a power plant near Pripyat, Ukraine, that suffered the worst nuclear disaster to ever take place. On April 26, 1986, the plant's staff performed a safety test to see how the reactor would respond in the event of a power outage. During the test, several safety protocols were ignored, but the tipping point that led to the explosion was caused by a critical design flaw in the control rods. The rods themselves were tipped with graphite, and so when the graphite rods were all inserted at once during the test, the graphite acted as an accelerant, which led to the explosion. The reactor core was blown apart and launched radioactive material into the atmosphere. The people living next to the plant in the city of Pripyat were evacuated on very short notice and didn't have much time to gather their belongings. 2 plant workers died on the night of the explosion, and 28 emergency responders passed away within a few weeks after the explosion from radiation syndrome, which is one of the worst ways to pass away. It's hard to tell exactly how many people passed away due to the effects of radiation exposure, but the estimation is in the thousands. The reactor is still incredibly radioactive, and in 2016, a shell was basically slid in place over the reactor in order to prevent additional radiation from spreading. Pripyat itself is less than 2 miles away from the plant, and it will be considered uninhabitable for 200,000 years. Maybe by then they'll still be making Call of Duty on its annual release schedule, but we'll see. Even though the area is still radioactive, you can actually visit Pripyat as a tourist. If you go there as a tourist, you'll have to go with a guide and monitor your radiation exposure, but there are several different YouTube creators who have gone and done a tour and documented it, and it's actually really cool. Going there is definitely on my bucket list, and if you plan on going, it may be best to wait until you're done having kids. If you're like me, then you didn't know anything about Chernobyl until you played All Ghillied Up in Call of Duty. Looking back now, it's a bit of a miracle that this level was even created in the first place. The mission was designed by a developer by the name of Mohammed Alavi, who also designed Crew Expendable and No Russian. Mohammed has talked quite a bit about the behind-the-scenes process of creating this level. He had to be fairly secretive about the way that he was designing the level, because some of what he was doing was considered either a bad idea or something that wouldn't work when he was designing the level. It required some innovation because Call of Duty hadn't done a stealth mission like that before. He also said that at that point they didn't have AI designed to just walk because in other levels the AI is either running or shooting. It's a good thing that things worked out the way that they did to where the mission was put into the game, because this level can also be considered one of the biggest turning points in Call of Duty campaigns because it slowed down the pacing of the story and made it feel more cinematic. The first scene of the level provides a great introduction right away. The music adds tension, and you can also see the Chernobyl power plant in the distance. And all of a sudden, Captain Macmillan seemingly appears out of nowhere because of his
ghillie suits.
Fun fact, the ghillie suit originated in Scotland. During World War I, Scottish snipers were the first to use them, which makes Captain Macmillan's accent a nice little Easter egg. When you see Captain Macmillan like this, you realize that you also look practically invisible. It's almost as if you're using an invisibility cloak. The conventional approach is to use this suit as much as possible, but if you want to live dangerously, you can take this kind of approach.
This is supposed to be a stealth mission.
Why?
Just shut up. Breach that door.
Okay.
If you do that, you'll occasionally hear this.
You're trying to get us killed? Move up and don't do that again.
One thing you may not know is that if you take out the people in this house right here, like so,
Take them out.
you don't even necessarily need to do it cleanly. You'll then proceed to the next area, and normally you would take out this guard in the tower first, but you'll take out the guy on foot instead.
The lookout's gonna see the body. He can call for help all he likes. Good thing there's no one left.
All by myself.
Beautiful.
Throughout this whole mission, there's a tension in the air that you can cut with a knife. No matter how many times I've played this, I always worried about missing a shot and then getting hit by a wave of enemies. The tension is at its highest when you suddenly have to drop and lay on the ground as a patrol passes over you, and you have to slowly maneuver between them. After you pass the patrol, you make it to this area here with abandoned military vehicles, and the reason that these vehicles are here is because they were used during the cleanup after the explosion. The vehicles were exposed to too much radiation to where they could no longer be used, and so they were just left there to rot. Those vehicles are still there to this day. The runner-up for the most intense moment in this level is this right here, where you have to follow Captain Macmillan extra closely to make sure that you're not spotted by a bigger group of soldiers, and then you gotta crawl under these vehicles. When you first play this part, there's always the worry that one of these vehicles is gonna move all of a sudden and leave you out in the open. After you make it to the more urban part of the area, there's a lot less action, and there are not any enemies inside the actual buildings. In an interview, Mohammed said that he didn't think it was very fitting to have enemies in the buildings as well. Because of this, more of your focus is on the remnants of what was left behind in a once flourishing city. If you listen carefully, you can still hear the sounds of kids playing off in the distance. It's a little creepy. Eventually you make it to the building where you're going to set up to take the shot. The ending of All Ghillied Up is a bit anticlimactic, and Mohammed Alvari said that he wished he could have added gameplay of you going through the building and setting up the sniper's nest, but he ran out of time. At the beginning of the following mission, you start off right away by looking down the sights of a Barrett 50 cal, waiting for Zakhaev to arrive. And while you're aiming down sights, Macmillan gives you these instructions.
Remember what I taught you. Keep in mind variable humidity and wind speed along the bullet's flight path. At this distance, you'll also have to take the Coriolis effect into account.
Apparently snipers have to take the Coriolis effect into account at certain distances because it accounts for the movement of the Earth while the bullet is in the air. I obviously have no clue on how that's calculated, but I imagine that it's probably fairly complicated. The deal ends up going south, and you take the shot.
Shot! Target down. I think you blew off his arm.
It's a bit ironic that Zakhaev loses his arm during an arms deal. It's too bad that the radiation exposure didn't make his arm grow back. I mean, come on, that's common sense, right? All Ghillied Up was about stealth and precision, and this mission is all about chaos and getting out of the area as soon as you can. You fight your way through the abandoned buildings trying to get to the exfil site, and things take a dramatic turn when Captain Macmillan is injured and you have to carry him. The exfil site is right next to the famous Ferris wheel and abandoned playground. You set Macmillan down and wait for the waves of enemy troops, and you have to fight them off until the helicopter arrives, and you can grab Macmillan and get out of there. In a previous video about Modern Warfare, I talked about just how hard this level is on Veteran, It took me several hours to finally get it done, and I had been close to breaking my controller a few times.
Oh, come on!
I can count all 13 times on my radioactive infected hands the amount of times that I've gone back to these levels. Playing these levels is like a suspenseful movie that I've seen multiple times and still have that worry in the back of my mind that things are going to go wrong. A movie that comes to mind is actually Rocky IV. During the last fight, there's still that worry that Drago's going to just beat the crap out of Rocky and win the fight. You may also remember that a form of this mission made an appearance in Spec Ops in Modern Warfare 2. The mission was called Hidden, and at the beginning of that mission, if you jump onto the cars like this, it'll allow for you to leave the path of the mission. At this point, you'll need to take a leap of faith and then you're able to explore. As you're exploring, you'll be able to go through a big portion of where the mission ends in All Ghillied Up, but here you can actually go right up next to the power plant. I'm not sure about how intentional the developers were about adding this area. You can go into some of the rooms like this one right here that has a poster of a lady that looks like Paulina from Call of Duty Vanguard. And if you've watched some of my other videos, you'll know that I absolutely love Vanguard. But in the year after Vanguard was released, there was Modern Warfare 2, and it was cool to see some references in that game where you play as Gaz following Price, and even though this game is a reboot, Captain Price uses similar language and instructions as Captain McMillan.
Try to anticipate their paths. If you have to maneuver, do it slow and steady. No quick movements.
He's missing the Scottish accent though.
Keep your
You shouldn't come out to play with the big boys, Ian, because you're about to get a proper Scottish welcome.
I'm sorry?
I think it's safe to say that I absolutely love this mission, and ever since I played it for the first time, I have been fascinated with Chernobyl, and I think it's really cool that a video game can do that, where it can, inspire not only me, but I'm sure that there's lots of other people that wanted to learn more about Chernobyl because of it. I also think that this mission is a big reason why this game was so successful and why the campaign is so memorable. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video, and if you want to watch a review on Modern Warfare, feel free to check it out and let me know what you think. I plan on coming out with more videos on Call of Duty and other video games in general. If you give that subscribe button a nice little love tap, it is greatly appreciated. Again, thanks so much for watching, and I hope you have a delightful day.
You're about to get a proper Scottish welcome.